Hello, welcome everybody to another stream, and for that matter, another industry spotlight. Today we've got Daniel from AMC. Daniel, thank you for joining us on this stream.
Thank you.
Live
thank you for
from
having
Romania
me. Thank
too.
you
So
for
it's the
having
evening
us.
for him. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yep. Thank you for having us. It's quite nice, quite a privilege to be here with you. Yeah, greetings from Romania here at the AMC offices, where it's in the evenings. Some colleagues are still here at work with me, and you see what I'm up to. You'll see what I'm up to.
Yeah. So thank you again for being a part of this industry spotlight. We're excited. Daniel's going to be sharing a little bit how AMC works, what they do as a studio, how they work. He's also going to be sharing project with you all and breaking down how he's worked on that particular project. So before we dive into that, we have a little video to show you guys what AMC is all about if you've never heard of them. So we want to play that first before we start going into the things that Daniel wants to share with you all. So sit back and get some popcorn. Let's play the little AMC video. All right, there you go. Nice little video to show you guys what AMC is all about. But Daniel's going to show you a little bit more and talk about what AMC does. So Daniel, I'll hand it over to you now.
Yeah, well, I guess what you can see in the video is what AMC looks like in between the work we do here. The attitude we have towards our colleague and the atmosphere here, which looks quite nice from the video. Actually, I was thinking when the stream started that maybe the fact that it's a bit silent now here is contrary to what you see there in the video, where people are usually talking, and that's what's usually happening here. We're the kind of company that works without the headphones on, just constantly joking and sharing with each other while we work and while we do. Of course, there are also some that prefer working with their headphones on, but we have room for everyone here. It's a nice place to be, really, either way. So a bit about AMC. It's an outsourcing company that's been founded 20 years ago, I think, maybe even a bit more. It started as a small project to make a game between the founders and some of their friends. And eventually they started doing outsourcing for getting funding for their game. And it eventually actually became a full-time thing, doing outsource art for the industry, the gaming industry. Yeah, that's basically the main picture that we have here. Maybe we could go further about how we work if you can ask me a few questions, what you would like to know, and I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's key to everyone watching understanding how AMC works too, right? Is that you guys are kind of like a satellite studio where you're working with other studios around the world. And I know you mentioned that some of your colleagues get on the schedule of the countries that they're working with, right? Because, i.e., if you're working with the country, United States, right? Some of your colleagues are working like midnight your time or 1 a.m. your time because they're trying to work with people over here.
Oh, maybe not that far, but yeah, it's a very flexible, quick schedule that we sometimes adapt to the studios we work on. Like we actually have a flexible schedule as a from the start. People come in at work from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. And also from 11 a.m. to whatever 9 hours later would be. But working as an outsourced company, we sometimes have to adapt, and to actually meet the client, we have to change our schedule a bit to be able to talk live in real time and not through emails and stuff that are maybe sometimes too late to be seen to start some work on I don't know, a feedback or something that is really urgent. So there are sometimes people that come at work at 12 a.m. so that they are able to meet with their clients, with the people that are working with them from across the ocean at, I don't know, 8 p.m. In the evening, where they have some 2, 3, 4 hours even overlapping time where they can actually discuss about the work that we are doing here. But it's not, it hasn't gone so far as to completely change the schedule, just adapt so there's a middle ground there, a middle island where the two people meet, like having 4 hours of normal work and 4 hours of work aligned with the people that are working across the ocean from us.
And then when you're working on a project, are you usually just working on one project, or are you as an artist, are you working on more than one project at a time?
Me as an artist, no, I usually work on a single project at a time, but we get divided in teams, and there are usually several projects going on at the same time, but not an artist being divided between several projects, because that would be a bit too much for the power of concentration of that artist. And we're aiming for quality, not being able to provide very little to very many people at the same time. And that means having to choose between one project or the other. And people are usually selected by the type of skills, the type of interest that they have to be put on a certain project and not, multiple. And basically, that's the choice for how people get to work on something and what they get to work on. And working as an outsourced company means sometimes that you have to adapt not only to the time schedule or time frame or of the people you are working with, but also to the workflows and the tools and stuff like that people are usually developing in-house. And you get to learn a lot of workflows working in an outsourced company, because you just have to keep up with what is given to you. It's not just look, here's this concept, do it. It's here's this concept, here's the way we usually work on stuff like this. How can you help us do this, and how can you help us make our way of working go even further? How can you improve our workflow if that's something you can do? So we usually work in parallel. We try to adapt, and sometimes studios adapt on the way that we provide something to them. We can give propositions, to improve something that can be improved if we have the tools to help a studio with that. And sometimes it happens.
Right. And I know you're going to show some examples here in a little bit, but something else that you guys are doing is education is important for you in Romania. And you guys are teaming up, right, and educating people on how to get into this industry in Romania.
Yeah, basically here in Romania, art schools are a bit reluctant to get into the digital art world. And there have been some tries for, I don't know, maybe 5 years now, that we've been teaching courses in the National University of Arts here in Bucharest, and the University of Architecture, and this year as well, and the engineering school, where a colleague of mine from the environment department taught a little course on 3D modeling. And we've started even having courses of our own. We also have mentorship programs where people that apply to them, basically this is on a yearly basis, and it goes on a bi-monthly program where people that apply to us and we consider that they are not yet at the level that they need to be to become our colleagues are sometimes given a mentorship, which is free, and it's a chance to work alongside one of the artists that are in-house here to do an asset and improve their skills until they're closer to an internship or even becoming a junior artist here at AMC. But yeah, the external part is this side with the courses that we've been holding at the university that are around Bucharest mainly. But I think we're going to expand to different areas of the country as well soon enough.
Great.
Given the resources and the time, because this is something that we do for free. Basically, something that we're cutting time off our work, our production work to help the industry grow here in Romania without asking for anything else in return. In return, maybe just scouting sometimes for potential colleagues, which are chosen sometimes not solely on skill, but also on the passion that they show in trying to learn something, or the potential, or sometimes having a creative and an artistic eye in a different medium of working can sometimes translate very well into ZBrush, for example. That's something that I will show a bit later.
Yeah. Well, I think we probably would want to get into your project that you worked on, Scavengers, right? And so you can start showing some of that, and then you can show some of the examples that you have for your student work that you were talking about. So we're going to play a little trailer again for you guys to see what Scavengers is all about, and because Daniel worked on that game, and he's going to be highlighting a specific character from that game and showing you guys and talking about the workflows and how they work at AMC. So let's play the trailer of Scavengers, and then we'll come back and Daniel will be sharing his character that he worked on.
When the asteroid struck, it remade our world. Your mission today shall not be easy. You won't go alone to the surface. In fact, I'm sending many teams. Collect the data I need. Take it if you must. Protect it if you can. The storms that plague this world are dangerously cold. Warmth will be essential to your survival.
Another day in paradise.
I've located several sites that warrant investigation. You'll need food to keep your stamina up. Arm yourself and scavenge whatever supplies you may find.
That's what I'm talking about.
Looks like we've got competition.
Let's do that again sometime.
Excellent. If you're not excited to play the game now, I don't know. It's a great trailer.
Yeah.
So we're going to share your screen now and let you take it from here and on the character that you now have up in ZBrush.
Yeah. So this is one of the main characters of the game that that's been added a bit later. Maybe to talk about a bit about Scavengers. It's a PvP PvE game. It's that type of battle royale that tries to mix these two elements together. So you have to also battle the other players trying to collect resources while also collecting resources from the PvE environment, which can be quite a challenge as there are always storms which can quite actually kill you. and other stuff like that. It's a fun game. I don't actually play games since I haven't played games since I've become a 3D artist and started making them, but I've actually played this one for like a whole week when I first started working on it. That's been my pattern lately in playing games when I work on them or something like that. And this character is one of the main that's been added a bit later. The first characters that we started on the game were quite early on. We started working on the game with Midwinter while they were quite early in the production stages in the alpha. I think actually the alpha started a bit after we started working on them, and mainly what we've done for them are characters. The first two characters that we started with them are also two of the main characters that they have there, and seeing a bit of how we work as an outsourced company. The two of the four game main characters that were made first to be in the game were made by us in parallel with the other two that were made in-house with them. So the plan was to get these four at the same time, and the two teams had to work kind of in parallel to work out the workflow that was going to be established at the beginning of making these characters. I think the characters that were as mobs or NPCs in game were solved much earlier than what was done on the main, so we haven't seen any work on that, but yeah, we've worked in parallel ever since the beginning of the project, or almost ever since the beginning of the project, and actually don't know how much earlier on they started before we actually stepped in as well. And we've been adapting and adjusting along with them and with their workflow that has changed quite a bit during the development process alongside with them. So yeah, this is the character that I'll be showcasing a bit, and what I want to show on it is how a few basic tools from ZBrush can basically help you complete a whole project like this, a whole character like this, without having to go much further into the more complicated stuff. And it's one of the parts that we try to teach when teaching ZBrush, that you can go a very long way with just learning the basics, and that's why we'll try to focus on that and what I have used them on, and maybe a bit or maybe a lot on how I try to keep my mesh clean from start to end, so that I can reduce as much as possible the topology work that I have to do with tools like Quadro and Maya or Topogun or stuff like that. So it's a thing that basically I've started using and developing for myself while on this project, because it proved to be quite helpful and quite in line to the requests, the technical requests of the project. One of the, let me show you first how the character turned out in the final version. So basically this is how it looks rendered, and taking the QRef a bit wider, you can see how the initial concept looked, and you can probably start from right from the start wonder what made us change, and how did we end up changing some of the elements that are looking in the concept in a certain way and ended up in the final model in a different way. The main thing that you can see here is the hair, probably, and it's something that comes along with the co-development, I guess. Having a concept artist on the side of the client being able to sketch while we're developing, and us being able to adapt to actually add another artist to the project to be able to figure out how the hair will end up, because this character was supposed to be done by me entirely, except the portrait, which is provided by the client. And after doing the initial blockout, which looked like this, the client decided that maybe we should go for something else with the hair. And we decided to split the project up into 2 smaller projects, the one that was dealing with the main armor and clothing of the character, and another one that was done by a colleague of mine, Liliana Aldica, who was sculpting the hair and had to do like 3 different versions of it before the client decided on something, even though there was a concept, another concept that was based on.
So when we're working with the clients, are you normally given the concept, or are you guys also doing concepts first and then sharing those with the clients?
We're usually given the concept. So yeah, until now we haven't made the concepts ourselves, but I hope I'm not spoiling anything, that will be along the way quite soon. The company, again, I'm hoping not to announce anything any sooner that I'm supposed to, but yeah, we'll probably start making concepts as well quite soon.
Okay.
And yeah, one of the parts that are probably a bit conspicuous when looking at how the blockout looks on these characters. So this is the initial, very first blockout. We usually give some estimates for the different phases of the project. And the first phase of this project was this kind of very rough, very sketched in, and made with primitives, mostly blockout, which I don't know, might look a bit peculiar for people, because nowadays blockouts look much more developed and actually sculpted. But basically, this was a choice of our client, and the reason for it is that we had some rigs that we had to adapt to, and had to work with more of the characters, and the blockout was a way of establishing the proportions of the character that we could send to the client to be tested. So an actual rig was attached to this kind of blockout to see if everything works, everything can be animated, everything can move without collapsing, without having geometry collapsing into other parts of geometry of the character. And it was first part that was sent. We actually had to wait a bit on main characters that didn't have a rig made beforehand, and afterwards see what else, what kind of changes were required for the character to
So you're given
end up
a
in
base
game.
model? Are you given the base model, or are you making the base model from scratch?
The base model, the base mesh?
Yeah.
Or no, usually characters have a base mesh that are provided by the client, and this client had like 3 base meshes for both male and female, which came on the different proportions that the characters had. But the base model that ended up in game was actually this one, because you can see there's no actual base beneath the surface, so it was supposed to work with the rig as good as possible. So it sometimes required some changes, as it happened with this one. I'll be switching a bit from character to character, from scene to scene actually, to see what kind of changes were made during the whole process of this character. So this is a second version of the blockout. After this was actually a third version of the blockout. The second one was this one, with things related to where we adjusted things related to the silhouette of the model. The client already changed their mind with the hair of the model. This was actually the second version of the hair that was going as a blockout, and afterwards there was this third version of the blockout, which had the decisions that were needed to make the character actually work in game, to be able to move without having this big coat, bending weirdly, like in a like him being a huge snowman or something like that, just bending from the middle of the body.
Yeah, your silhouette changed quite a bit from the first blockout to
Yeah.
third one here. That was a big change. If you, so
Yep,
you can see them
that's
switching.
another thing that I wanted to actually talk about is this little feature that we have here in ZBrush, and is quite helpful for these very rough sketches that are supposed to have a silhouette that's going to work on the final character in certain ways, but not to have any actual details on it. So if you look at this and compare it to the initial version, this is much closer in the bigger shapes than what the initial blockout looked like. You see, here the big shapes change, but here only the small ones start changing up, where you just can't add the little details that are supposed to be there on the folds and construction of the jacket of the character. But yeah, it's something that I personally and we always look for to make sure that the silhouette is there from the start, because there's this rule that started where characters in games were much smaller in the screen than what they are now, that the character has to be quite recognizable even if you look at him from afar. So you see a silhouette like this and you kind of have to know which character it is, even if you don't actually see the characters. And this actually goes traverses the whole pipeline of a character made for games.
So a question came in. I don't know if you remember. Do you remember how many UV sets this particular character had?
Yeah, this kind of characters had a set of UV for the top part of the armor, one for the bottom part of the armor, one for the hair, and one for the head. And this character in particular actually had one more, because his jacket is so big and it would have made the texel density be quite unequal if compared to the other parts, if the whole parts in the top gear were to be in the same texture. So as you can see here in the groups that I have, there's an outer gear which is basically only the coat, head and hair, which are actually two separate textures, an upper gear, which is again another set of textures, and the lower gear.
What was the triangle budget total for him? Do you remember?
For the outfit, it was around 40k triangles, for the hair around 10k triangles, and I think another 15-20k for the head.
Okay, so you're close to 100.
Around 70k, 60-70k
80.
was basically the top of poly count for these kind of characters. And yeah, another particularity of this game that is probably of this workflow that the game required, that is probably not so often encountered nowadays, is the fact that everything was supposed to be done in ZBrush from scratch to end. That means from blockout to high poly. It was in the blockout part, at least, it was a thing of preference. Some of my colleagues were actually doing the blockouts in Maya. We were supposed to be presenting the blockouts in Maya, and the rest of it was supposed to be sculpted top to bottom in ZBrush. So no Marvelous went in, no, at least for my part, no other modeling software. So everything was done in ZBrush, and it's quite a ideal kind of project from my part, in that you have to sculpt everything instead of going through all the technical bits that characters require nowadays. And it's always fun to think about how you can simplify some of the things that it doesn't look very realistic, but it looks convincing at the same time. As you can see on this character, most of the folds are quite big, and it was a design choice basically to again make it visible from afar, because we wouldn't have players get too close to the model. And what I wanted to talk about a bit is one of the tools, very basic tools that I use from ZBrush, that is very helpful for me, especially when I work from a base mesh to keep a clean topology from top to bottom when I'm working on this kind of character, and if I want to keep the topology as clean as possible so as to have the least amount of retopology to do and low poly. And that is the extraction tool, which can be quite useful if you use it straight from the low poly, because what happens usually is, let me grab this tool. So I'm just masking with a lasso and extracting. You can see without accepting that it's just mimicking the topology of what is underneath it. And if you actually turn this to 0, it can be quite helpful to actually extract from what you have at the bottom, from the base mesh, basically the main topology that you're going to be using for the whole part. And I just grabbed C-modeler to delete some of the edges here. Delete poly loop and delete polygroup island. You see, you can get quite easily the topology that you'll be able to work on.
Yeah, it's a smart move.
Subdivided easily.
Using the extract, because it's going to give the exact same geometry that's
Yep,
mapped.
it's a very powerful feature. I don't know, it's something that can be quite easily overlooked, that you can extract something from a base mesh instead of just adding a bit of something with Dynamesh and working on top of it to give it the shape. That you can keep this so as to have that geometry until late in the
process.
Yes.
Yeah, your goal is to keep it low polygon, simple, so you can do big changes and big movements before you worry about all your fine details of wrinkles and things like that.
Yeah. Yep. And also another thing that helps me keep a clean topology is the polygroup tool I use together with the ZBrush tool that keeps the polygroups. You can see that this was also extracted from the base mesh, dragged a bit, then I prepared a bit of a cylinder here with a slice tool that you can another thing that's working very mathematically in ZBrush to help you keep things clean. Basically, if you use ZRemesher with keep groups active, and usually I use half or same depending on what kind of geometry I want to achieve there. But basically, keeping this thing active when you first do a block out like the one that you've seen there, and having some polygroups there will make you know for sure that the two lines in the that are determining the polygroup will have edge loops from one top to bottom to the bottom. So this will be straight usually, regardless of what kind of topology you have in the rest. And usually I just do that and ZRemesh until I can obtain that kind of stuff all over the model, and delete the pieces at the end so that I have a clean topology to work on.
Right, so you slice it up, remesh it, and then you use ZModeler to even just delete edge loops more and reduce the polygon count even more for yourself.
Yep, and you end up getting to a place like this where you can just add some seams at the base to just
Are you using creasing? Are you using creasing on those edges? It looks like you got creasing, right?
Yep, that's another thing that I wanted to show. Basically, after using stuff like this, it's a better example here. One rule that I've made for myself is always work from top to bottom and from small to big. So when having weird shapes, you can just think about how you can split those shapes into smaller shapes to have them work together, and then think about how you can cleanly merge them together if that's something that is supposed to happen. So how are they going to work if they are supposed to be in one piece in the final high poly? And there are a lot of ways to do that, and one of the ways that I find to be most useful is using the same polygroups that you've seen there with the same settings, basically. Depending on my needs, I also disable smoothing group sometimes. This can be quite destructive if you actually sculpted a very big shape, bigger than the one you have here, a very complex shape that you've splitten up using polygroups. You want to keep the edges clean and not you want to keep the edges as you sculpted them and not just removing by smoothing. And you see that step by step, if you ZBrush several times, it gets quite cleaner. And adding crease polygroup with level of 2 can actually help you have a piece composed of 2 smaller pieces that is quite clean at the place where it was merged. So it's again something I use for stuff like these maybe, which are maybe sometimes complex. This time, as you can see, I've actually kept them separate. But yeah, it's basically the same principle that I usually use, just separated them in several smaller pieces so that I can work on them separately and unite them if needed. If not, just clean them using crease polygroups. One of the tools I use most in the company of modeler.
Yeah, polygroups I think is one of the most important features. There's so much that you can do with polygrouping inside of ZBrush. So taking advantage of it makes a smoother pipeline for yourselves. And one-click solutions, a lot of stuff can happen from polygroups.
It's something I use constantly in basically everything I do. If you look here, the final version of the final version of the lookout here has quite a weird shape because it was done in a hurry and extracted as it was from this piece that I have here that was also extracted from this piece. This is also helpful because if you look here, the lines are continuous. This was actually a technical request of the client for this game that we clean every edge. This is actually something that's supposed to happen for most games, but to have continuous edge flows from one piece to the other so that we can unite them, and in the low poly and the skinning can work quite nicely. So basically I started doing this straight from ZBrush by just extracting and keeping this and then just using the remesher to make sure that there are also continuous edge loops on all sides of the model to be able to continue this by just deleting some of the edges and bringing that stuff into Maya to clean it up by not just building with Quadro all over the model again.
Yeah, that was actually a question that came through. I think that's highlighting what he's talking about. It was, do you try to preserve the low poly as much as possible in ZBrush so you can only make minimal changes later on in other software? Right. I think that's a key part for you. You're trying to keep that edge flow the same and all those
pieces. This is actually the final low poly here. You can see it's actually the exact edge flow that I had there in ZBrush. Just that one thing that I did was to actually unite in Maya the pieces that I have here together so that they have a continuous edge flow over the pieces. So that's why. This
is the one that went in the engine. This is
the one that went in the engine. Oh, I haven't put the hair in here, but yeah, this is the one that went into the engine, the final version of the low poly. again, if you look at the other pieces, there are also a lot of telltales that show you that I actually use these little things and just rounded them up here and there to be able to bring them in game. So this piece, for example, was almost the same. Here, there are the two main edges that got subdivided, and I had to add manually one more to be able to preserve the roundness. But it's again the same workflow where I just have the pieces built on top with the extraction tool and the theory mesher, and having the continuous edge flow in ZBrush actually helps me to unite them just by using target weld in Maya, because the vertices already match.
Yeah, I think the key part here is I know a lot of people ask about game ready mesh. Is one thing that Daniel's highlighting here, right? He's building things in pieces, and then he's worrying once he's got it, he'll make the version where he's going to weld everything together to make the final piece, like a lot of the stuff he's showing here.
Yeah. Yeah, another thing that we've had to do here in ZBrush is the sculpting of the folds, the drapery of the character, which is also sculpted in ZBrush, as I was saying, and it's also made with the basic tools that ZBrush provides. Basically, the brushes that I use mostly are clay brush, clay buildup, actually, standard brush, which I usually modify a bit by adding from the brush this function here, which makes it a bit sharper, and it's I don't know, I find it a bit better than using it with an alpha, and it looks quite close to what the SK cloth looks like. If you can see, these are the two brushes together. Have SK cloth is actually the only brush.
Yeah, so this is the brush you were using for the cloth. You were making adjustments.
Just standard brush with an AccuCurve added in, and usually I add a bit of SK cloth on top of it at the end, because I usually start sculpting the folds on a level like this to bring in the big details, you know, like stuff that are supposed to give something in the silhouette of the character, and that are a bit harder to make in a higher poly version of the model, and that's harder to do with the standard brush on the high poly, because if I go there and do a line with it, you'll see that we have this kind of little dots appearing. So usually I use this as well on a lower poly version where I sculpt the main shapes, and the higher poly version just sees SK cloth doing its thing, because here it actually acts better than standard brush. But yeah, it's a combination of these three little brushes that are quite not so advanced tool in ZBrush, just using the brushes. And it's actually something I try to say to people that are at the very beginning with the ZBrush. Just try to master these first 2-3 tools that you're using to be able to sculpt with them, and afterwards think of the more complicated stuff that are in there and that can help you, but in things that are usually very specific. Usually you can get away with a lot of things by just using these little brushes that you have. Some of them standardly, some of them added. And again, this is the only brush that I have added in my startup in ZBrush that I use constantly for sculpting. And here what I was trying to achieve is having these kind of folds where that are built up basically on top of a very thick jacket, that are not traversing the whole thickness of the jacket, are just you know, at the surface of it, and it's actually visible in the type of reference I have here. You see, these are something on the surface of it, and not folds that are running deep through the material, and are maybe a bit harder to achieve when you're sculpting especially when you're trying to do a stylized character like the one that we have here. Yeah.
The fur that's going around the top, you did that in ZBrush as well with a brush?
Yeah, that's basically made with an IMM brush, and I have a small thing here to show you a bit the faces from through which it went. This is a sculpt, a very rough sculpt of it in the blockout that I did to be able to build upon the fur with these kind of brushes that I have. And usually what I do is just these are usually inverted. It's not necessarily, but if you get a brush like this and you want it to go the other way around, you can just go to the stroke and inverse the curve there, and now it will be like this. But yeah, basically what I did, and I opened up.
Yeah, so you're using the block out to help get that silhouette
Yeah.
frame, and then just drawing on top of the block out. And you made the pieces in the IMM yourself?
No, it's an IMM that I think we got from our station, or another place where people share like this. Basically what I do, and I actually open two versions of the blockout here because it's quite visible the way that I work. And here you see that there are some bigger shapes that are forming here that are quite repetitive. And what I did is first to make these kind of shapes by drawing several of these IMM brushes together, moving them just with the, let me show you the other version of it, just moving them, drawing a piece, something like this. Oh, I'm drawing on something else. Drawing a piece like this maybe, and then copying it a few times and moving it with the move brush to get the bits together, because that's a pain at the retopology, and this is the kind of thing that you can't actually keep from ZBrush. You just have to do it manually because it's too complex, and you have to think from the ZBrush how to make the work easier for you when you actually get to the retopology stage. So what I did to avoid having to retopologize too much while also trying to keep it interesting was making some bolts in different shapes like this, and then using again polygroups for them. Let me switch using polygroups for them to be able to isolate them easily, and then just move them around as a whole until I have the whole of the body cover, the whole of the fur covered as was needed. And
go ahead, sorry.
yeah, and to keep things not too similar, I usually made like 4 or 5 bolts like this to be able to copy each of them individually and more versions of it, and that can be seen in this version of the.
Nice. What I also want to share for those that maybe like this, what he's doing here, there is a brush in ZBrush that ships with ZBrush that looks a lot like this. There's an extruder brush that will give you guys things like this.
One.
The extruder profile. Yeah, that he's highlighting right now. So if you guys want to try experimenting with what he's doing here too, there is a brush that ships with ZBrush that can give this look too. I know somebody was also asking about how you did the hair on his face. If you can share a little bit about that.
The hair was done by a colleague of mine, and it was basically just sculpted. But yeah, I can share a bit of that on another of these as well. Let me go ahead and delete that. Basically, that's done on I subdivided a bit, and what I usually do to achieve shapes like that is starting again with the clay brush to usually just do this all over the model to add some shapes, some basic shapes, that are usually in the direction I want the hair to be in. And after I have some randomness obtained from the clay brush used like that, I just start with the damp standard brush and sculpt them manually like this, adding more strands over it as it goes along. But yeah, it's this sort of process, a bit time consuming, but quite
and you're switching
quite fun to
and you're
do.
switching from pushing in and pushing out. You're switching between holding the whole key.
So basically the strands that I want to be using as detail to break up the main shapes, I just use the Alt key to switch to the Z-add version of the brush to actually highlight it a bit more. But this is again something I do after adding another subdivision and working on top of it, on top of the shapes that I've had there. That's it's again something that's quite straightforward, but it just requires time to get it to look better. Lazy mouse sometimes helps as well if you want to have everything clean enough.
Yeah, it's just that passion thing, right? Taking time and going through
it. Yeah, these are also made in the same way that you've seen there. I had the small pieces remeshed, made polygroups all over the place where I wanted to have a plane change. Used crease polygroups usually with a level or two of 3 on the subdivision levels, because it gives a bit of a sharper look for hard surface models, and then just a bit of cleanup afterwards manually with H polish or stuff like that. Again, the same workflow. If you look at my model, everything from top to bottom is full of polygroups that are defining every edge change. I do this on the cloth pieces as well for adding seams even. Just add the polygroups here and just work with the crease level. Here you see it's on level 2 to make sure that the corners are a bit more rounded to make it look more like organic material. This is something quite big because the game was because we're not the project is closed for us at the moment, so we're not working on it still. But yeah, the choices were made around this kind of bigger, thicker edges and seams to make it visible from afar.
Right, and you did the hard surface as well in ZBrush. I know somebody asked that.
Yeah.
And you had different. You want to show those images of that actual wrist piece where you had images showing your process?
Yeah, I had a few images of showing the high poly piece where how it went from the blockout stage to the high poly to the low poly, where you can see that there are these lines that are traversing it that are visible from through all stages of the model that are here shown. Just with a few more on the low poly because I had to make sure that this looks round in the view as well. Also wanted to highlight this a bit. This is with another version of the hair that was made. It's actually here in this. That was another final version of the model that had to go through some changes. This is what I was saying at the beginning about the decision to split the character into 2 parts so that someone can make a few variations of the hair so that we can decide on a final one that was this one at the end, the third or fourth version, I think. Yeah, it's present here as well. It was present from the blockout, this one. What else I wanted to share here is how the changes of the silhouette of the fur can affect the whole character. Because, you know, I was trying to cheat a bit there because I didn't want to go through the process of doing the whole retopology of this kind of thing, which can be quite nerve-wracking, so to speak. So the whole character doing it in low poly took like 2 days for the parts that were actually made in ZBrush, so this was quite fast. But the fur took me like 5 days to complete because it was just a mess, and I had to go in and just retopologize everything. So the first choice that I wanted to make to avoid having to do that kind of thing manually was to just avoid having a lot of strands in the silhouette. But this is something that my lead at the time, Edward Fleising, caught on, and I actually went in and at his request just made the character more interesting in the silhouette. Basically, what we're looking for is having something to pop out here in the silhouette view, regardless of the way that we're looking at the character. So something has to be here to make it a bit more visually interesting if you're just looking at it from afar, because you can see that even if we zoom out, those things are still there. And again, it's something that we use in a process like this from the beginning of the blockout to the end of the high poly, because it's helpful to look at the character in this sort of
So I have a
shape.
two-parter question here. I know
Yeah.
you mentioned another colleague did the hair, but
Yeah.
you did everything else, right? So it was just the two of you that worked on this? You
Yep.
did everything but the hair, right?
Yep, and the portrait was provided by the client.
And how long do you guys usually get to work on a project like this, including the character, the modeling, the clothing?
Well, it usually depends on the project. For this this character, I think the high poly had about 2 weeks tops. The blockout stage 2 days, so 16 hours, and yeah.
And were you working like 8-hour days, you think?
Yeah,
during
yeah,
those 2 weeks?
8-hour
or-
days.
Yeah, 8-hour days. Right, so give you
8-hour
guys a
days.
timeline. That's for that question, how long he had.
So
to
it's
complete this
like
project.
I guess around 80 hours, 90 hours for the whole thing from blockout to the final high poly. Maybe a bit less. I don't know. It depends from character to character. Can be quite a bit more. And characters like this, where there's a fur or hair that has to be done manual, and it's very tedious work at times, where you just have to go in and look at how every line is looking. Usually after I do this, this is not just subdivided. One more thing I do to make sure that it's looking a bit interesting is to go with the condensed standard brush over it, change the intensity, and again add some lines to break up the silhouette, break up the main
The
details of the of the fur, to have some secondary detailing on it, even if those things are not always so visible from afar. On a character like this, the primary and secondary detailing are the main part, because you can't see, even on smaller folds like this one, that these are tertiary details. I think there's also secondary. They're quite big. They're supposed to be big and visible from afar on characters that are only to be seen from afar. So it's this sort of thing that we're trying to put an emphasis in. And you can see that even these sort of detail from a version that looked like this, we decided to actually change them a bit because it just didn't look interesting enough in the silhouette there, and having it pop a bit more helps with how the character is readable here in the
And then
section view of it.
someone also asked if you could show your technique of blocking out hard surface. Maybe if you have an example.
Blocking
you'd
out
like
hard
to
surface.
block out.
Well, yeah, sure. Let me work on maybe this guy, where I have a piece like this, and I'm gonna open up my QRF on the other image to look at what I'm doing. So one thing that I usually do when blocking out, it's basically the same workflow, just that I duplicate the piece and drag with move brush on the pieces that are supposed to be left to be modified, make a new polygroup to get the new piece that I want. Again, work on the shape with the move brush to just get it in the general position that I want. Very roughly, really. Adding another loop there and extruding with the polygroup island usually. I working a lot with polygroups. I try to keep even smaller pieces separate. So the extrude that I do is mostly with polygroup island because works inside my workflow of keeping everything separate inside the same piece with the polygroups, and using from the Z model or the Move Infinite Radius, which has some other features here. If you press Shift and Alt, basically Alt to inflate, which can be used for all sorts of things, and Shift to just drag to slide the edge across the model without changing the shape of the model, and inserting a few new edges to change the shape, and here a few more polygons to be able to switch the shape a bit more. Again, either with a single poly or polygroup island if oh yeah, the back had the same polygroup. So usually what I do is just press Alt for a new polygon and press Alt again until I make them into different polygroups. And if I have two islands here that are the same polygroup, I can just use maybe polygroup all here to just drag the whole thing and do the same shape that I had in there, and then just fit it to the rest of the model with the shape that I want, again with the move brush, because it's not important for me at this level to have the geometry as clean. That can be done a bit later, but just to get the shape fast in place and just move it around.
And then same person they were asking, do you use Dynamesh to do hard surfacing at all, or you stay with this work?
When the shapes are very complex, I just do a basic sculpt of it in Dynamesh and use the Z plugin that is in here. It's called Polygroup It, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you were just by it. Up one more.
Up one more. Oh yeah.
Here you go.
Here. So basically, let's do this on something like this as a test. Dynamesh it a bit and just put some random shapes on it. Basically, if
you're using H polish right now, which one are you using?
Yeah, H polish to make some flat shapes there. And this is a paintbrush that I'll use. I'm gonna fill the object with white and then go on black with the paintbrush and start drawing some lines on the shapes that I made quickly with the with the H polish brush to highlight the, to basically limit the places that I want to be polygrouped with that plugin that we have there. So this works basically with recognizing the intensity of the paint, and this has to be quite black, and usually make sure to press quite strongly on the tablet so you don't have things that look like this and which are causing breakups in the line. So just push with all the heart on the tablet there, and then if you go to ZBrush and polygroup it from paint, it will wait a bit, and you'll have this kind of polygroups made automatically by it, and then you can use the same workflow that I was telling you about earlier, where you can just smooth groups with half geometry and keep groups there, and you'll be able to get this shape with the proper topology after you ZRemesh it a few times. And this kind of stuff, when there are more complex shapes, I usually just deactivate the smoothing groups and ZRemesh quite a few times until I get to a shape that is easily changeable using ZRemesh, ZModeler. So again, you see it got to a very clean place that you can start dragging on again with the move brush, but it's something that you can manipulate much easier. And again, to get to a cleaner state, it would need a bit more attention, but you can again get those delimitations that would be quite hard to model manually with ZModeler on more complex shape by just using again crease polygroups with a level of 3. So it's the same shape, but made quite clean, quite easily with 3 basic tools.
So the final one, the hair, it wasn't hair cards. You actually used the sculpted version and doing.
Yeah, it's a sculpted version in the game as well. It's visible here in the final render. So it's just geometry. Again, based on the style choice by the client. The fur is also geometry. It had a bit more detail added in with a substance painter. Just painted it in. It's basically the tertiary detail here was added either in the engine directly by the client or by us on pieces like this by painting them in the substance painter,
Mm-hmm. Are you doing that technique often, or is it mostly hair cards? Are you guys doing this technique for the hair usually?
No, this was a specific requirement for this project. We on other projects we use hair cards as well. Well, it depends on the style of the project, the requirements of the client, stuff like this.
Right. And then to convert all the fur in the back, you just did a Dynamesh to weld it all, or did you use unified skin?
No, I actually went with this as well. One thing that I actually use, it's a thing that I learned from Eddie, which was my lead at the time, is that actually if you have to do a retopology on something that's a complex shape like this, you can Dynamesh it in ZBrush and bring it to Maya, and Maya will read it actually better than having a shape that is composed of multiple smaller shapes like it was here. So just Dynamesh it for the retopology to make sure that Maya knows how to read it. But for the final model, I just kept it like this and baked from it. Just merged the 2 pieces together. I kept them like this because I actually built this part on this side, copied it here symmetrically with mirror and weld, and just made the middle again manually and made asymmetry again manually on both parts by dragging the pieces as I group them using polygroups there.
And then a question came up, but this might be good for you too. I know someone's asking about the FBX in ZBrush. When you export an FBX, it's not going to automatically generate maps, but if you have the maps in your subtools, you can tell the FBX to export the maps with your model. Is that what you guys are you guys using FBX or?
Not no, for this project, no. Yeah. Actually, what I use FBX a lot for is, again, for the polygroups, because FBX actually exports polygroups from ZBrush, and OBJ doesn't do that. And that's quite useful if you want to transfer a piece of a model like this from one scene to the other, or have to import it somewhere else, and you don't just want to save it as a different scene and append. You can just export as FBX, and it works quite well. I've used FBX exporting with maps for different kinds of stuff. Basically, if I want to, this is something that I use for my smaller personal projects where I just want to sculpt something and render it quickly in Marmoset. I just use FBX exporter, where I can just export a polypaint from ZBrush along with the normals and whatever else I add here to be able to use it in the renderer without having to go to a texturing phase in a different software. So I just basically use that to be able to go through the whole thing with texturing as well, with color as well, and ZBrush to also be able to render it.
Good. Awesome, thank you. And I know we had talked about how AMC is doing teachings, right? And you wanted to show some student work too, because I think there's a lot of questions are about how long you're getting. So I don't know if you want to share those examples too, the student work, because the stuff they're kicking out in a short period of time is pretty awesome.
Yeah, basically, as I said, we have some courses. We had some courses in the past. I think the school year has just ended, and also our courses for this year. There's a different program that has to start for next year, I guess. But yeah, we have a lot of these things as well. And one of them was a summer practice that we did at the National University of Arts here in Romania. It was basically making an introduction in ZBrush for 3 weeks, where we had a first course, a first lecture of 4 hours. So there were 3 weeks, each having 2 lectures of 4 hours per week, so 6 lectures in total, where the students were having me and a colleague of mine helping them with their projects in ZBrush. And the first lecture was an introduction, and after that introduction of 4 hours, where we talked about the main tools in ZBrush, sculpted live for them, and explained as we did what we did there. They started working on their own models, and the rest of the weeks we just worked with them together on their models, just grabbing from them the whips that they had at the moment and giving them feedback live, while also showcasing the tools, constantly teaching about them. And these are the results that they got with just a bit of feedback and that first introduction, and the small tips that they could have gotten from the feedback that we give. So these were made by students that had had put their hands for the first time in ZBrush in those 3 weeks with us, with that small introduction there. They were art students, so they had the background there. This one was one of the most impressive, where this girl that did this actually started from a sphere and started building it bit by bit, again with a bit of help from us, towards this thing that was quite impressive for someone that uses ZBrush for the first time. And I have to admit that I've made these screenshots, and I've chose the most appealing angles for the sculpts, because they were beginners after all, and if you look at them from different angles, you might notice that the legs were a bit shorter than they are supposed to be for a center of this size or other stuff like that. But again, for me at least, it was quite impressive to see students being able to work so fast with ZBrush and do results that, I don't know, they're better than the first results I had when I first started ZBrush.
Me too.
I remember the things that I did in those first few minutes there. I just discovered the H polish brush, started playing around with it, and just with the H polish brush on a sphere, I managed to make a robot that kind of looked like the head of a fly, but it looked quite awful compared to what these guys made here. This is also quite impressive. The girl here tried to make her self-portrait in the first try with ZBrush. It was close, still had a bit more. I think she doesn't look like, this mad all the time, and of course she doesn't have snakes instead of hair. But we had a team for the 2 weeks that we worked on this, and it was based on the Dante's Inferno, the book. So last year there were 400 years, I think, since the birth of Dante, and there was an exhibition that we were supposed to be in with the students from this that got canceled after all. But the theme of the whole practice was based on that book and characters from that book. So this is Gorgona, Medusa.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic for 3 weeks, right? And never having opened ZBrush before. This is great. What they're doing.
Yeah. One of them, this guy actually came with an internship with us a bit later, and I think he might be starting as our colleague later on this year.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. That's really great. That's great to hear. Yeah, and again, we want to highlight this, that AMC is doing this, right, with people in Romania trying to get artists there. As Daniel mentioned, the 3D is harder to learn. And then also programs.
And working on this kind of program, we have a bit more things coming actually this month and next month as well. And it's a challenge that's also meant for beginner artists, maybe people that have been able to do something for their
If you want to put that link in our private chat, I can put it in the public chat.
Yep.
There you go. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm gonna
so this is the challenge that's open to anybody?
Yeah, there's a challenge open to anybody. Basically, we're looking for beginner artists mostly, and the prizes are some mentorships with us. As I was telling that we're holding each year for 2 months, and 3 spots, and on the camp that we're organizing. And the benchmark model here was made by my colleague Sorin Verdes, who was a junior at the time. And basically we wanted to make something that catches a bit of the character of the, catches the likeness of the character and has a bit of the character of what he was doing. And this was actually a DJ that you will be able to learn from this video that was actually assassinated here in Romania in the communist era, because he was basically giving children and young people access to music that was banned in our country. He was a DJ at a Free Europe radio station, if you've heard of that. And he was killed in a parking lot. And the theme of the challenge is to find someone like him and make a likeness, a sculpt as well as you can, to highlight a hero of your own in the way that you want him highlighted. We've actually had a challenge like this last year, and the 3 winners that we had at that challenge are actually our colleagues now here at AMC.
Oh, nice.
The prizes there were actually different, not mentorships and scholarships at the school we're organizing, the summer camp that we're organizing, but some 3D prints of their sculpts and other stuff like that. This year's challenge is focused on characters mainly, though. And this is a poster of the sculpt jam that we're organizing. That will be a summer school in Bulgaria, Krapets, which is a small village there, fisherman village, and the idea behind it would be to gather up with some artists and do something of a bust of people, fishermen that we might be able to find in there, to be able to work together somewhat on a full-time schedule, together with myself, another colleague of mine, and a few other artists, to make busts, having in mind the results that we had here, basically trying to be realistic of what we can get in a short time period, but also trying to get as far as possible with that smaller pieces of a character in that small time period. And making a portrait is a fundamental piece of knowledge that every artist should have, regardless of what he is doing, if he's specialized on likenesses or not. And basically focusing on this is a good way to also focus on something very artistic and on something that is quite easily achievable with ZBrush in no time at all. If you
That's all. Thanks for sharing all that with the student work and those challenges. I think challenges are really good. They put you in a kind of box, a time frame that you got to get something done, and makes you become a faster sculptor, because then you got to find your techniques that you need to do maybe to get something done quickly. So I encourage anybody to do challenges. It really, you'll see your work jump a level, and your speed also for when you want to go work on your other projects, how much faster you'll get by doing a couple challenges here and there. I think it's a great practice for those that are watching this right now, trying to learn sculpting. I would encourage you to do some challenges for sure.
Yep. We also have a Discord challenge channel available for people that want to get started here, and challenges help you get a long way in your development as an artist, because you can also share the steps you're making as an artist toward that final piece that you want to turn in for the challenge. And that channel in Discord that we have helps the artists that are participating provide the feedback both for them, for each other, and also having some of our artists present there to provide them with some feedback.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you again for sharing that. Was that all? I think those are all the items you wanted to cover, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's I think.
Yep.
Everything we had to go through.
What one other question came through for what render engine would you recommend? And I'll add on to this. What do you know what engine they ended up using for Scavengers?
They used the Unreal Engine for Scavengers. The rendering that I have here was made in Marmoset, and I don't know, for real-time characters, it's probably the easiest to learn and most preferable if you don't want to go through the hassle that Unreal Engine can be, especially if you're at the beginning. But I don't know, if I am to choose, I think Arnold would be the renderer of choice for me.
Arnold for your renderer. Okay.
Yeah.
So an engine-wise, I think Marmoset's a great start. For if you're trying to get into gaming, they do a great job. Has a fantastic renderer. Yeah, and then you got Unreal or Unity. But you also keep in mind, for those of the person maybe that asked the question, keep in mind though, depending on the studio you work at, some studios have their own engines. So you're going to work with their engine depending on the studio you go to. So keep that in mind too. I wouldn't hang up too much on what engine to learn. It's more about understanding how to get out of ZBrush into the engine is what also is an important element, and understanding that workflow is more important than necessarily the engine itself per se, because of where you might end up could have their own engine.
Yep. That's actually that's something we have to work with as an outsourced company as well. Sometimes we work with the engine that the companies that we work for have made for themselves internally, and sometimes we have to learn that as well. which can be challenging sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be quite helpful because these kind of 3D software have those same principles that cross from one to the other. And once you've learned one engine, you might be able to get into another one and pick up the more complicated stuff from the bits and pieces that you've learned in the fundamentals of another one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Well, Daniel, this has been a lot of fun. I thank you for sharing so much and what you guys are doing at AMC, and hats off to you guys too, also embracing education and making that happen in Romania, getting the next set of artists inspired to want to get in this industry and teaching them the way. That's amazing. So I really appreciate you taking time out of your evening. Again, he's in Romania, so it's evening for Daniel right now. So I appreciate you taking the night
8:23 right now.
spend some time with us. And if you guys have all enjoyed this stream, please keep in mind, we are doing streams like this, like with Daniel. This is a industry spotlight. Next week, though, we have a ZBrush Central image breakdown. So every Tuesday, we are trying to do a stream with a particular artist or a particular studio or a particular pipeline workflow. So next week's is going to be with Dan, and he's going to show how he uses ZBrush to do like toon rendering and making characters that are more like a toon shaded look to them, and showing all the techniques that he liked to do with that. So if you've been enjoying this stream with Daniel, you'll want to come by for next week too, and keep an eye on the schedule. So I'll put this in here. This is our calendar so that you guys can see what other streams are coming up. And keep in mind too, this channel is almost live every single week at this point now. I mean, every single day, sorry. There's artists there. We have 40 plus artists now that go live on this channel, sharing their techniques, sharing what they do. So besides the streams that we're doing right now with like Daniel, come by, because there's always artists on here and wanting to help and looking to help as well. So I wanted to make sure you guys are aware of that stream next Tuesday too. So Daniel, thank you again for doing this with us, and thank everyone at AMC too, that behind the curtain to help put this all together for us. Thank you. Really
thank you for the chance. It's we're all here big fans of ZBrush, and I think it's a good chance. Here's a colleague of mine that wants to say hello as well, I guess.
You got a colleague sitting there coming in, eh?
Yeah, he's sitting here watching the stream
there
as
he
well.
is.
Live. Yeah.
I like it.
So thanks again for the chance, and it's been fun, and I hope I was able to showcase something that's helpful for at least some beginner artists, since the things that I wanted to talk about are basic tools that I consider very important in ZBrush and can take you quite far if you use them well and carefully enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, for all of you, you can go back and watch this. This is all automatically recorded. It goes instantly on our YouTube channel and also on our Twitch channel. So you can rewatch this as much as you want after this stream has ended too. So don't forget about that. So again, thank you, Daniel. Thank you, AMC. Thank you, your colleagues sitting next to you and everybody else that was involved putting this all together. Really appreciate this. I'm Paul Gabriel with another Industry Spotlight, and hopefully we see you guys next Tuesday in the stream with Dan. Have a great evening and day, everybody. Bye.
Goodbye.